Hello everyone, I'm making a quick video today to teach you how to make a character to play BWERPG, the best wizard ever role-playing game, a game that I made myself, a tabletop game wherein you take on the roles of wizards, shitty wizards, and go on all sorts of crazy adventures, casting all sorts of crazy spells. The basic playtest rules for this game are available for download on my Ko-fi page, as are the character sheets that you'll see me filling out. Both of those are free of charge. A link is going to be in the description. Check them out. So, I have a character concept in mind already. I would like to make a wizard who is sort of a ranger type, somebody who attacks with a bow, whose spells support their ability to attack with a bow, and who's also really good at hiding, sneaking around, and taking people out before they know that they're in a fight. So, first thing that I need to do is figure out my stats. Here in this scroll looking thing, I've got 6 normie stats. And up here in this wand, I've got 3 wizard stats. And I have 60 points that I can distribute between them. Starting with my normie stats, these are going to be set anywhere from 1 to 10. Most important stats for my character concept are going to be quickness and slickness. So, I'm going to put an 8 in quickness, pretty close to the maximum. This is going to enable me to attack better with my bow. It's going to make me faster. It's going to let me attack first. And it's also going to help me avoid incoming attacks. Slickness, I also want to be pretty high. That is going to help me hide. It's going to help me see other creatures that are hiding. And it's going to help me do all kinds of crime stuff. A lot of fun. As for my 4 other normie stats, bigness is going to be pretty low with a 3. Bigness determines the number of wounds that I can take before I become beat up. When I'm beat up, I can no longer attack or cast spells, but doesn't matter, I'm not going to get hit. 3 is just fine. Strongness, I'm going to put that at a 2. I don't quite want it to be at the minimum value, just in the off chance that I need to drag some bodies out of the forest at some point. But 2 is good enough. I'm not going to be using it a whole lot. Fierceness, I want to be decently high, so we'll put it middle of the road at 5. Fierceness determines how many wounds I can take beyond being beat up before I am killed. I can also expend points of fierceness while I'm beat up in order to act normally with bonuses. So important to put a few extra points in there if you have them. As for hygiene, leave that at a 1. Useless stat. At this point, I have 34 points left to spend on wizard stats, those being mana pool, channeling, and focus. And each of these points that I invest is going to be multiplied, as I will describe. To start out, mana pool, the maximum amount of mana that I can have at any one time. I want this to be pretty high because I want to be able to cast powerful spells to take people out in one shot. So I will invest here 14 points. They get multiplied by 7 for a total of 98. Current mana will also be 98. Next, for my channeling stat, this determines the most mana that I can spend on any one spell. I also want this to be pretty high for the same reason, so I'll put 15 points here for a total of 75 after it gets multiplied by 5. That leaves me 5 points left for focus. That gets multiplied by 3 for a total of 15. Focus determines how much mana I recover at the start of my turn, or how much mana I recover per minute when I'm not in a conflict. It doesn't need to be very high, because as I said, my plan is to take people out in one shot, so if I'm recovering mana, I've already done something wrong. A few other details I want to point out are these little check boxes next to my wizard stats. If I meet the requirements during a conflict, I can put a little check mark next to them. And once the conflict is over, I can choose one of my checked stats to improve. Beneath that, you'll see that there is a Monologue section. This is primarily used if I cast a spell that lasts for a while and which reduces my maximum mana temporarily. I'm not taking a spell that's going to be doing that, so I don't need to worry about it. And under my normie stats, you'll see that there's all these dice. This is to keep track of what dice I roll for each stat. By default, I'll be rolling d12s, as you can see here. But as I become wounded, I may take a die penalty. So if I take one wound, one die penalty on my strongness, I cross out the d12, now I'm rolling d10s. If I take another one, cross out the d10, now I'm rolling d8s, and so forth. But as a fresh character, of course, none of that applies to me right now. So that's my stats all sorted out. Looking down at the bottom half of the page, you'll see that there's a little book where I can write down some more stuff. As for knacks, I get 2 of these as a fresh character. And for anything I have a knack with, I get to roll a bonus die when I do it. So picking off the list in the basic rules, I'll take a knack for bows and a knack for hiding. That's it. Pretty straightforward. There's also a section here for stuff, as in the stuff that I'm carrying. By default, you can have any items that you need in order to use your knacks or your spells. So the only stuff that I need is a bow and some arrows. I am also allowed to start with a set of clothes, which I guess I'll take because I'd like to have a cool mask of some kind. Up here you'll see that there's also a section to keep track of my training. As a fresh character, I don't need to worry about that. And there's also a section for notes where I can write down anything I want, from my character description to characters that I've met during my adventure, or what my current quest is, or what sort of magical effects I'm currently under. But for now, I'll just leave it blank. And with that, I have pretty much finished with the main page of the character sheet, so I will move on to the spell sheet. There's 2 different versions of this sheet. The one that you see here has space for 4 spells to be filled out. There is an alternate one which has space for only 1 spell, but it's got a lot more room to add all the details. Since I'm going to be taking 2 spells, I will be using this sheet. The spells I've picked are off of the weak starting spell list, which is why I can start with 2. If I picked a strong starting spell, I would only get 1. Spells that I've chosen are Magic Arrow and Sneak Attack. Now, you may have noticed that there's also a space up here where I can fill out information on spell school, any effects that might have on any spells that I cast from that school. However, since these are both generic spells, I don't need to worry about it. So, for each of these, I'm going to fill out a little bit of information. The implement that I need for both is a bow. Sneak Attack is able to be used with other weapon types as well, but I know which kind I'm going to be using. Also looking at the book, I can fill out the base mana cost for each of these, and the per level mana cost. So if I decide to upcast a spell, for every level that I add, I pay this much extra mana. As for my maximum cast value, this is determined by the stat the spell is based on, plus the number of other spells that I know. Since I know 2 spells, number of other spells is going to be 1. Magic Arrow is based on quickness, plus 1. It's going to be 9. And Sneak Attack is based off of slickness, so that's 7 plus 1 equals 8. There's also some space here where I can fill out the effects of the spell and some of my upcast options. You can be as verbose or as brief as you want here. The only purpose is to remind you of what your spells can do without you having to look it up. So, the effect for Magic Arrow is that it conjures arrows when attacking. So I don't actually need those arrows that I'm carrying around, but I'll save them for emergencies. I'm going to write down just 2 upcasts as I'm starting out, since I can't use the really good ones that I'm hoping to build up to later. But by adding 2 levels to this spell, I can get plus 10 feet of range on my attack, those long distance sniper shots. And for 10 levels, I can get plus 1 to the roll for the attack. My attacks are going to be quickness versus quickness for the most part with my bow. And that'll give me an additional plus 1 on top of that. Pretty handy. Now, the effect for sneak attack is that I get an automatic crit. The target is unaware. So if they can't see me, or if they don't realize that they're in a fight yet, automatic crits. Normally, a crit is if I roll twice as high as my opponent or higher. In the case of sneak attack, I deal +1 missing blood type wound on a natural crit. So there's still some benefit to having a high roll here. As for upcasts, by adding 4 levels, I get +1 to the roll. And by adding 7 levels, inflict +1 missing blood wound on a natural crit. That's how you stack up wounds, that's how you deal the big damage. So at this point, my spell sheet is filled out pretty much to my satisfaction. I'll point out that there is also a checkbox here. If you cast one of your spells in conflict, you can check it off and then pick one of them to improve at the end of the conflict if you like. The third and final sheet that I need to worry about is the wounds tracker. This is primarily used during the game, as you can write down the total number of wounds that you have, and you can also check off these boxes next to the various wound types. You'll see there's information on what sort of die penalty you take for each type of wound, as well as what you need to do to recover from that wound. Many of the basic wound types are listed here, but there is also space at the bottom if you want to fill in some extras, some of the more unusual ones as they come up. The only information that I need to record right here are my beat up and my dead values. Beat up value is equal to bigness, that's 3. Dead value is equal to bigness plus fierceness, that's 8. So if I take 3 wounds, I'm beat up. If I take 8 wounds, I'm dead. That's all I really need to know here. So, heading back to the front page of the character sheet, the very last thing that I need to do is figure out my character's name and appearance. Name is going to be Scuffle Nubs. And for the portrait, and some leaves here so you know this guy lives in the forest. And just like that, Scuffle Nubs is ready to play. The only things that I need now are 2 to 4 additional players to also make wizards, and I need some poor schmuck to play as the GM. So, as I said, Best Wizard Ever role-playing game. The basic playtest rules are available for download on my Ko-fi. As of today, I am also releasing an expansion to those basic rules. In there you will find some Q&A type information on how to play the game or how to GM the game, as well as 25 additional spells for you to check out. I hope that you've found this informative, and I hope that you enjoy playing BWERP. Thanks a lot.